The lights in the great meeting hall flickered as another explosion shook the space station. Commander Zeth walked quickly down the long corridor, his blue skin pale with worry. Behind him, 3 other alien leaders followed with equal concern on their faces. The war was going badly, and everyone knew it. The Vorth Empire had been attacking planets for 3 years now. Their soldiers were not normal creatures. They could heal from terrible wounds and grow stronger after each battle. The alien armies of the galaxy had tried everything. Laser weapons worked once, then the Vorth adapted. Poison gas killed a few, then they became immune. Even nuclear weapons only slowed them down. Seth reached the main door and pressed his hand against the scanner. The heavy metal doors opened with a loud hiss. Inside, delegates from 40 different worlds sat around a massive table. Some looked like giant insects. Others resembled walking trees. A few were just floating balls of light. But all of them looked scared. The Centaurian ambassador stood up as Zeth entered. Her crystal body caught the light and threw rainbow patterns on the walls. Her voice sounded like wind chimes when she spoke. "Commander, we have lost another system. The Vorth took the mining colonies in the Beta sector yesterday. They killed everyone." Zeth sat down heavily in his chair. The weight of command felt heavier each day. "How many ships did we lose this time?" 17 battlecruisers and their escort fleets," replied General Cax from across the table. The insect-like warrior clicked his mandibles together in frustration. "The Vorth just walked through our defenses like they were not there. Our best weapons barely scratched their armor." An older delegate with gray fur spoke up from the back of the room. "Perhaps we should consider surrender. At least some of our people would survive under Vorth rule." The room erupted in angry voices. Several delegates stood up and began shouting. Zeth slammed his fist on the table, and the noise stopped. "We will not surrender," Zeth said firmly. "There has to be another way. We just need to think differently." The Crystal Ambassador touched a control panel, and a holographic display appeared above the table. It showed a map of the galaxy with red marks indicating Vorth territories. The red areas covered nearly half the known space. "What if we look for allies outside our normal sphere?" she suggested. "The archives mention several warrior species that we have never contacted." General Cax made a disgusted sound. "We have already asked the Klingari Empire. They want too much in return. The shadows refuse to leave their home dimension. Who else is there?" The crystal being moved her delicate fingers across the control panel. New information appeared on the display. "There are some old survey records from the Outer Rim. A probe visited a system called Sol about 200 years ago. It found a species called humans on the 3rd planet." Zeth leaned forward with interest. "What did the probe report about these humans?" "Limited data," she admitted. "The probe had technical problems and only recorded basic information. But what it found was interesting. The humans appear to be a warrior species. They have survived multiple global conflicts and defeated something called fascism in a great war." The gray-furred delegate looked skeptical. "One planet against the Vorth Empire? How many of these humans are there?" The Crystal Ambassador checked the data again. "Approximately 8 billion individuals. Their technology level is primitive compared to ours, but they seem to have a strong military tradition." 8 billion warriors, General Cax said thoughtfully. "That could make a difference if they are truly as fierce as the records suggest." Zeth studied the holographic display showing the Sol system. The 3rd planet looked small and blue from space. It did not look like the home of a warrior race, but appearances could be deceiving. "What exactly did they defeat in this great war?" he asked, the crystal being scrolled through the incomplete records. "The data is fragmented, but it mentions a group called Nazis who tried to conquer their world. The humans organized a global alliance and defeated them after 6 years of fighting. The probe also recorded other conflicts throughout their history, so they know how to fight organized enemies," Seth mused. "That is more than we can say for most species." A new voice spoke from the other end of the table. Ambassador Vel, whose people resembled tall blue plants, had remained quiet until now. "The probe records mention something else. These humans apparently eliminated several other species on their planet. They seem to be very effective at warfare." General Cax rubbed his antennae together. a sign of deep thought among his people. Effective enough to fight the Vorth? We have no other options, Zeth said finally. Our conventional forces are losing. The Vorth adapt to everything we try. Perhaps we need someone who thinks differently about warfare. The Crystal Ambassador began composing a message on her control panel. I will prepare a distress signal for the Sol system. What should we tell them? Zeth considered the question carefully. The message needed to be compelling but not desperate. These humans might refuse to help if they thought the situation was hopeless. Tell them that the galaxy needs heroes, he said. Explain that an evil empire threatens all free peoples. Ask them to send their best warriors to help us fight for freedom and justice. The message took several hours to compose properly. The translation systems had difficulty converting galactic standard language into something the humans could understand. Finally, the signal was ready for transmission. Message prepared for the Sol system, announced the Crystal Ambassador. Estimated travel time is 3 months. Zeth nodded approvingly. Send it immediately. And may the cosmic forces help us if these humans refuse to answer. The signal launched from the station's main communications array. It traveled faster than light toward the distant Sol system, carrying the hopes of 40 different worlds. None of the delegates in the meeting hall realized they had made a critical error. The old probe that had surveyed Earth 2 centuries earlier had malfunctioned badly. Its records contained only sanitized historical accounts and basic biological data. It had completely missed the darker aspects of human nature. The probe had not recorded the full truth about how humans actually fought their wars. If the Galactic Council had known the complete truth about humanity, they might have sent a very different message. Or perhaps they would not have sent any message at all. But the signal was already racing through space toward Earth, and there was no way to call it back now. In 3 months, they would discover exactly what kind of warriors they had summoned to fight their war. Captain Jake Morrison was drinking his morning coffee when the alarm started screaming. The orbital defense platform around Earth had been quiet for months, with nothing more exciting than asteroid tracking and satellite maintenance. Now every screen in the command center was flashing red. What have we got, Lieutenant? Jake asked as he set down his mug and walked to the main display. Lieutenant Karen Phillips looked up from her console with wide eyes. Sir, we are receiving a transmission from outside the solar system. The computers say it is some kind of first contact signal. Jake felt his stomach drop. First contact protocols existed, but nobody really expected to use them. The transmission took 3 hours to decode properly. When the translation finished, Jake read the message twice to make sure he understood it correctly. The message spoke of a galactic war, an evil empire conquering peaceful worlds, and a desperate need for heroes. It asked Earth to send its finest warriors to help save the galaxy. Within 6 hours, every major government on Earth had copies of the message. Within 12 hours, emergency sessions were being held in capitals around the world. Within 24 hours, Admiral Kate Sullivan was standing in the Pentagon briefing room, explaining why she should lead the mission. Look, Kate said, pointing at the star charts on the wall. These aliens are getting their asses kicked by some kind of regenerating space monsters. They need help, and they are asking for it nicely. That makes them the good guys in my book. The Secretary of Defense looked skeptical. Admiral, they are asking for warriors. They want us to fight their war for them. Kate shrugged. So what? We have been fighting wars since we invented sticks. At least this time we get to fight the actual bad guys instead of each other. The president leaned back in his chair. What kind of force would you recommend, Admiral? Give me everything, Kate replied without hesitation. Every volunteer we can get. Marines, Army, Navy, Air Force, Coast Guard. Hell, give me some park, rangers and wildlife officers too. This is not going to be a normal war. 3 weeks later, the hastily assembled Earth fleet prepared to leave orbit. The ships were converted cargo vessels and passenger liners fitted with basic weapons and life support systems. They looked nothing like proper warships, but they were all Earth could build in such a short time. Admiral Sullivan stood on the bridge of her flagship, a converted cruise ship now called the Freedom. Around her, the mixed crew prepared for departure. The mission had attracted volunteers from every walk of life on Earth. Sergeant Marcus Webb had been working private security when the call went out. Before that, he had spent 5 years fighting, in underground cage matches. He was not the kind of person who usually joined military missions, but the idea of fighting alien monsters appealed to him. Dr. Lisa Price had volunteered from her job in a Chicago emergency room. She had seen every kind of trauma that humans could inflict on each other. The idea of patching up wounded soldiers in space did not seem much different than her normal work. Danny Torres had been demolishing old buildings when he heard about the mission. He had learned about explosives in the Army, but civilian demolition paid better. The chance to blow up alien targets sounded like the best job offer he had ever received. Dr. Amy Collins was perhaps the most unusual volunteer. She had spent her career studying dangerous animals in Africa and Australia. When she heard about regenerating alien warriors, she immediately thought of them as just another predator species that needed to be understood. The fleet departed Earth orbit on a Tuesday morning. The journey to the rendezvous point would take 3 months, giving the mixed human force time to train together and prepare for whatever they might face. The alien message had included coordinates for a neutral meeting point called Nexus Prime. The humans had no idea what to expect when they arrived, but they were looking forward to finding out. During the journey, the different groups of humans began working together in ways that would have surprised the aliens who had sent the original message. The military personnel trained the civilians in basic combat techniques. The civilians taught the military personnel specialized skills that might prove useful. Danny Torres showed everyone how to make explosives from common household chemicals. Dr. Collins explained how to track and hunt dangerous animals using basics, psychology. Dr. Price trained combat medics in emergency surgical techniques. Marcus Webb taught hand-to-hand fighting methods that were definitely not in any military manual. Admiral Sullivan encouraged this cross-training. She had read the alien message carefully, and she suspected that normal military tactics might not work against enemies who could adapt to any weapon. The humans would need to be creative and unpredictable. When the fleet finally reached Nexus Prime, the first thing Jake Morrison noticed was how clean everything looked. The alien space station was all smooth curves and gleaming metal. It looked like something from a science fiction movie. The second thing he noticed was how nervous the aliens seemed when they met the human delegation. Commander Zeth and his team had expected disciplined soldiers in proper uniforms. Instead, they got Admiral Sullivan and her group. Kate wore her dress uniform, but she had modified it with extra pockets and equipment loops. Marcus Webb looked like he was dressed for a street fight rather than a diplomatic meeting. Danny Torres had somehow managed to smuggle a bag of suspicious-looking tools onto the station. Dr. Collins carried a medical kit that seemed to contain more tranquilizer darts than bandages. The first meeting did not go well. Commander Zeth tried to explain galactic military protocols and proper rules of engagement. Admiral Sullivan listened politely for about 10 minutes, then interrupted. "Let me get this straight," she said. "You have been fighting these Vorth things for 3 years using proper tactics and fancy weapons, and you have been losing the whole time." Commander Zeth looked uncomfortable. "The situation is difficult, but we maintain hope that with proper reinforcements and heroes like yourselves—" "Heroes?" Kate laughed. "You did not ask for heroes. You asked for warriors. There is a big difference." The alien delegation exchanged worried glances. This was not how they had expected their salvation to begin. Dr. Collins raised her hand like a student in class. "Excuse me, but could we see some biological data on these Vorth creatures? I would like to understand how their regeneration system works. Why would you need such information?" asked the Crystal Ambassador. Amy smiled in a way that made several aliens step backward. "Because every biological system has weaknesses. You just need to know where to look for them." The meeting continued for several more hours, but it became clear that the humans and aliens had very different ideas about how wars should be fought. The aliens talked about honor and proper military conduct. The humans talked about winning by any means necessary. When the meeting finally ended, Commander Zeth was more worried than ever. These humans did not seem like the noble warriors he had expected. They seemed like something much more dangerous and unpredictable. He was right to be worried, but for reasons he could not yet imagine. The first joint operation was supposed to be simple, Commander Zeth had chosen an easy target to help the humans get used to galactic warfare. The Vorth had occupied a small mining station in the outer rim, and intelligence suggested only a light garrison was present. The plan was straightforward according to galactic military standards. The combined fleet would approach the station, demand surrender, and if refused, engage in organized battle formations. The aliens expected the humans to follow their lead and learn proper combat procedures. What actually happened was very different. Admiral Sullivan listened to the battle plan during the briefing, nodding politely as Commander Zeth explained the proper approach vectors and communication protocols. When he finished, she stood up and addressed her human personnel. "Okay, people, here is what we are really going to do," she announced. "Marcus, take your team and figure out how to get inside that station without being seen. Danny, I want you to map every power junction and life support system. Lisa, set up a field hospital but make it mobile. Amy, start working on biological warfare options." The alien officers looked confused. This was not how military operations were supposed to work. Commander Zeth tried to explain that they had already planned the mission according to established protocols. "Your protocols have been losing this war for 3 years, Kate replied bluntly. "We are going to try something different." The human ships approached the mining station in a scattered formation that made the alien commanders nervous. It looked disorganized and unprofessional. The Vorth garrison responded exactly as expected, powering up their weapons and preparing for a conventional battle. That was when Marcus Webb and his infiltration team struck from inside the station. Marcus had spent the previous week studying the station's construction plans. While the aliens were making their formal approach, he and 12 other humans had used maintenance pods to sneak inside through the waste disposal system. It was dirty, undignified work that no proper galactic warrior would consider. The Vorth never saw them coming. The attack began when Danny Torres detonated charges he had placed throughout the station's power grid. Half the lights went out immediately, and the defensive weapons lost power. In the confusion that followed, Marcus and his team began hunting Vorth soldiers through the darkened corridors. The aliens watching from their ships were horrified by what they saw on the security feeds. The humans did not fight like warriors, at all. They fought like predators stalking prey through a jungle. Marcus would appear behind a Vorth soldier, strike with a knife or improvised weapon, then disappear into the shadows before reinforcements could arrive. His team used tactics that the aliens had never seen before. They set traps in doorways, poisoned the air recycling systems, and turned the station's own maintenance robots into remote-controlled weapons. When a Vorth champion challenged the humans to honorable single combat, Private Jenny Adams shot him in the knee with a hunting rifle, then finished him off with a machete while he was writhing on the ground. "That is not honorable combat," protested Commander Zeth over the radio. "No," agreed Admiral Sullivan, "but it works." Dr. Amy Collins proved to be particularly unsettling to observe. She had requested live Vorth specimens for research, and Marcus had been happy to provide them. Amy studied the captured aliens with the same detached interest that she had once used to examine dangerous snakes. "Fascinating," she murmured as she poked at a sedated Vorth warrior with a probe. "The regeneration process requires massive amounts of protein and calcium. Cut off their food supply for 72 hours, and they should become significantly weaker." She began taking tissue samples and blood specimens while the Vorth soldier was still alive. The alien medical officers who were observing the process looked sick. This was not how prisoners were supposed to be treated according to galactic conventions. "Is this really necessary?" asked the Crystal Ambassador. Amy looked up from her work, with surprise. "Of course it is necessary. How else are we supposed to understand their biology? You cannot fight an enemy effectively without knowing how they work." The battle for the mining station lasted only 6 hours. When it was over, every Vorth soldier was dead and the humans had suffered only 3 minor injuries. The alien commanders had never seen such a one-sided victory against Vorth forces, but the victory had come at a cost that none of them had expected to pay. The humans had not just defeated the enemy, they had studied them, dissected them, and learned everything possible about their biology and psychology. Dr. Collins presented her preliminary findings to the Joint Command staff the next day. Her report was thorough, scientific, and absolutely terrifying. The Vorth regeneration system is actually quite primitive, she explained. It requires specific nutritional inputs and can be disrupted by introducing toxins that interfere with cellular repair mechanisms. I have identified 17 different Earth-based pathogens that should prove fatal to Vorth physiology. Commander Zeth looked uncomfortable. You want to use biological weapons? I want to win the war, Amy replied matter-of-factly. Biological weapons are just tools like any other weapon. The question is not whether to use them, but how to use them most effectively. The alien officers exchanged worried glances. They had wanted heroes to save them from the Vorth Empire. What they had gotten instead was something much more dangerous. The humans did not fight like any warrior species in the galactic archives. They fought like apex predators who had evolved to hunt and kill efficiently. They showed no emotion when taking lives, no hesitation when using dirty tactics, and no mercy for defeated enemies. Marcus Webb summed up the human approach during a planning session for their next mission. The aliens keep talking about honor and fair fighting, he said, but this is not a sporting event. This is survival. In a real fight, there are no rules except winning. The other humans nodded in agreement. They had come to the galaxy expecting to fight monsters, and they were prepared to become monsters themselves if that was what it took to win. The alien commanders began to realize that they had made a terrible mistake. They had asked for Earth's warriors, assuming that all warrior species were basically the same. But humans were not like other warriors. They were something much more dangerous. They were predators who had learned to use technology and tactics to enhance their natural hunting instincts. They did not fight for honor or glory. They fought to eliminate threats as efficiently as possible. The war was about to change in ways that neither side had anticipated. The Vorth Empire was about to discover what it meant to be hunted by Earth's most dangerous species. And the Galactic Council was about to learn why some warriors should never be invited to someone else's fight. Word spread quickly through both the Allied fleets and the Vorth Empire about what had happened at the mining station. The humans had not just won a battle. They had turned it into a laboratory experiment with living subjects. Admiral Kate Sullivan noticed the change in how other species looked at her crew. The alien officers who had once been friendly now kept their distance. Conversations stopped when humans entered a room. The Crystal Ambassador no longer made eye contact during briefings. Kate did not care. The humans had a job to do, and hurt feelings were not going to stop them from doing it. The next target was a Vorth supply depot that fed 3 different front lines. According to standard galactic tactics, it should have required a major assault with significant casualties. The humans had a different approach in mind. Dr. Amy Collins had been busy during the week since their first victory. Her biological warfare research had produced results that impressed even Danny Torres, and Danny was hard to impress when it came to creative destruction. I have developed a modified strain of Earth influenza that should be fatal to Vorth physiology, Amy announced during the mission briefing. Their immune systems have never encountered anything like it. Commander Zeth looked disturbed. You want to commit genocide with disease? Amy shook her head patiently. Not genocide. Tactical biological warfare. There is a difference. Genocide would involve targeting civilian populations. This will only affect military personnel in combat zones. The distinction did not seem to comfort the alien commanders, but Admiral Sullivan approved the plan immediately. The attack on the supply depot began 3 days later. Marcus Webb led a small team of infiltrators to the depot, while the main fleet remained hidden behind a nearby asteroid field. Their mission was not to fight the garrison, but to contaminate the food and water supplies with Amy's modified virus. The infiltration took 18 hours. Marcus and his team moved through the depot like ghosts, avoiding detection while they planted biological agents throughout the facility. By the time they were finished, every meal and drink in the facility carried a delayed action death sentence. The humans waited patiently for the virus to take effect. It took 3 days for the first Vorth soldiers to start showing symptoms. Within a week, the entire garrison was dead, and the depot was abandoned. The Vorth High Command was baffled. They sent investigation teams to determine what had happened, but the humans had cleaned up most of the evidence. All the investigators found were dead soldiers with no obvious cause of death. Biological warfare, Admiral Sullivan explained to the Joint Command Staff. Clean, efficient, and nearly impossible to trace. The Vorth will waste time and resources trying to figure out what killed their people. Danny Torres had developed his own specialty during this time. He called it psychological warfare, but the aliens called it terrorism. Danny would disable Vorth ships without destroying them, leaving just enough survivors to spread stories about what they had witnessed. The tales these survivors told began to affect Vorth morale throughout the Empire. They spoke of humans who could track prey across multiple star systems, who never forgot an enemy, and who seemed to enjoy the process of hunting intelligent beings. One particular story involved a Vorth patrol ship that had encountered Danny's team near a contested world. The humans had boarded the ship, disabled most of the crew with non-lethal weapons, and then spent 6 hours methodically destroying everything on board, while the survivors watched helplessly. Danny had left the life support systems intact and provided the survivors with just enough fuel to reach the nearest Vorth base, but he had also left them a message that was now spreading through the Empire like a virus. "We know where you live," the message said in perfect Vorth language. "We know where your families live. We know where your homeworlds are. Surrender now, or we will visit each of you personally." The message included detailed files on 17 different Vorth military installations, complete with structural weaknesses, personnel rosters, and tactical assessments. The implication was clear. The humans had been watching, learning, and preparing for a campaign that would target every Vorth military facility in the galaxy. Dr. Lisa Price had also developed her own reputation among both allies and enemies. Her field hospitals moved constantly, appearing wherever human forces were engaged in combat operations, but it was not her medical skills that made her famous. Lisa had a complete lack of emotional response to horrible injuries. She would perform complex surgery on wounded soldiers while under enemy fire, maintaining a steady stream of conversation that alternated between medical observations and increasingly creative insults directed at whoever was shooting at her. During one memorable battle, she had operated on a wounded Marine, while Vorth artillery was landing around her position. Throughout the entire procedure, she kept up a running commentary that was picked up by communications equipment. "Okay, I need to repair this artery before he bleeds out," she said calmly as explosions shook the ground around her. "These Vorthi idiots really need to work on their accuracy. I have seen stormtroopers with better aim than this." The recording of that conversation became popular among human forces, but it terrified the aliens who heard it. What kind of being could remain so calm while performing surgery in a war zone? The answer was becoming clear to everyone involved in the war. Humans were not like other warrior species. They were apex predators who had learned to use technology and organization to enhance their natural hunting abilities. Marcus Webb explained the difference during a joint strategy meeting. "You aliens fight wars like they are sporting events," he said. "You have rules and codes of honor. You try to minimize casualties and protect non-combatants. You fight to achieve political objectives." He paused to let that sink in before continuing. "Humans do not fight wars. We conduct extinctions. When we decide that something needs to die, we do not stop until it is dead. We do not take prisoners, unless they are useful for intelligence. We do not show mercy unless it serves our strategic interests." The alien commanders listened to this explanation with growing horror. They had wanted heroes to save them from the Vorth Empire. Instead, they had summoned something that was potentially more dangerous than their original enemies. But the results spoke for themselves. In 6 months, the human forces had destroyed more Vorth installations than the combined galactic fleets had managed in 3 years of conventional warfare. The tide of the war was finally turning in favor of the Allies. The cost of victory was becoming apparent, however. The humans were changing the fundamental nature of warfare in the galaxy. They were introducing concepts like biological weapons, psychological warfare, and total elimination of enemy forces that had never been part of galactic military doctrine. Commander Zeth filed a classified report with the Galactic Council that would remain sealed for generations. In it, he wrote, "We asked for warriors and received predators. The humans are winning our war for us, but they are also destroying the civilized standards that have governed galactic conflict for millennia." The report concluded with a warning that would prove to be prophetic. When this war ends, we must ensure that the humans return to their home system and remain there. They must never be allowed to become our enemies. But first, the war had to be won. And the humans were just getting started with their campaign of systematic extinction against the Vorth Empire. The hunt was about to enter its final phase, and the galaxy would never be the same. The Vorth homeworld had never been attacked in the 3,000-year history of their empire. The planet was heavily defended with orbital weapons platforms, shield generators, and a garrison of their finest warriors. The Galactic Council had always assumed it would take a massive fleet and millions of casualties to breach those defenses. Admiral Kate Sullivan had been studying the planet for 2 months, and she had reached a different conclusion entirely. "We are not going to attack their defenses," she announced during the final planning session. "We are going to ignore them completely." Commander Zeth looked confused. "How can you ignore orbital weapons platforms and shield generators?" Kate smiled, in a way that made several alien officers uncomfortable. "Because we are not going to fight a space battle. We are going to conduct an extermination." The plan the humans had developed was unlike anything in galactic military history. Instead of a massive frontal assault, they would infiltrate the planet's ecosystem and infrastructure over a period of weeks, then trigger a cascade of failures that would make the world uninhabitable for Vorth physiology. Dr. Amy Collins had spent months developing biological agents specifically designed to target Vorth agriculture and water systems. Her modified Earth bacteria would cause widespread crop failures and contaminate freshwater supplies without harming other forms of life on the planet. Danny Torres had been even more creative. He had designed delayed action explosives that could be introduced into the planet's infrastructure through normal supply channels. The devices would remain dormant for months, then activate simultaneously to destroy power grids, communication networks, and transportation systems. Marcus Webb had trained local resistance fighters from species that the Vorth had conquered but not exterminated. These fighters knew the planet's geography and could move freely through civilian areas without attracting attention. The operation began 6 weeks before the main fleet even approached the system. Human infiltration teams used captured Vorth transport ships to reach the planet's surface, where they began seeding the environment with Amy's biological weapons. The bacteria spread quickly through the planet's agricultural regions. Within 3 weeks, food production had dropped by 60%. The Vorth government blamed poor weather and increased food imports from other worlds. Danny's explosives were introduced through routine maintenance contracts with infrastructure companies. Human agents, disguised as captured slaves from various species, planted the devices in power plants, communication hubs, and military installations throughout the planet. The psychological warfare campaign began a month before the final assault. Human agents broadcast messages on all Vorth communication frequencies, providing detailed information about their infiltration efforts and the fate that awaited the Empire. "We have been watching you for months," the messages said in perfect Vorth language. "We know where your leaders live. We know where your military bases are hidden. We know where your families sleep at night." The broadcasts included real-time intelligence about Vorth military movements and classified government communications. The implication was clear. The humans had completely penetrated Vorth security and could strike anywhere they chose. The messages also included graphic descriptions of what had happened to other Vorth worlds that had been visited by human forces. Disease outbreaks, infrastructure failures, and the complete disappearance of military personnel were described in clinical detail. The final psychological blow came when the humans broadcast live video feeds from inside the planet's most secure military installations. The feeds showed human agents moving freely through areas that were supposed to be impenetrable, examining classified documents and planting additional explosives. By the time the main human fleet reached the system, panic was already spreading through the Vorth government. Military units were deserting their posts. Civilian populations were fleeing major cities. The orbital defense platforms were undermanned and operating at reduced capacity. Admiral Sullivan's fleet did not engage the orbital defenses at all. Instead, they established a blockade around the planet and began broadcasting a simple message to the Vorth High Command. "This is Admiral Kate Sullivan of the Earth Fleet," the message began. "Your planet has been compromised. Your food supplies are contaminated. Your infrastructure is rigged to explode. Your security has been completely penetrated." The message continued with specific details about the infiltration operation, including the locations of key biological weapons deployments and explosive devices. The information was accurate enough to prove that the humans were telling the truth. "You have 24 hours to surrender unconditionally," the message concluded. "If you refuse, we will activate our biological and explosive agents simultaneously. Your planet will become uninhabitable, and your species will be extinct within 6 months. The Vorth Emperor tried to call the human bluff. He ordered his military forces to locate and disarm the human devices, while preparing for a conventional battle with the orbiting fleet. That was when Danny Torres activated just 10% of his explosive devices as a demonstration. The explosions destroyed 3 major cities, 12 military bases, and the planet's primary communication network. The blasts were precisely timed and targeted to maximize psychological impact, while demonstrating the scope of human preparation. Dr. Collins activated one of her biological agents in a limited area, causing a localized crop failure that killed all vegetation within a 100-kilometer radius. The dead zone appeared overnight, leaving behind sterile soil that would not support life for decades. The demonstration lasted exactly 1 hour. When it was over, Admiral Sullivan broadcast a new message to the surviving Vorth leadership. "That was 10% of our capability," she announced. "You now have 12 hours to surrender, or we will activate the remaining 90%. The surrender came within 6 hours. The Vorth Emperor's final transmission was broadcast across the entire galaxy, ensuring that every species would understand what had happened. The message was simple and direct. The Vorth Empire surrenders unconditionally to the forces of Earth. We recognize the complete superiority of human warfare and request mercy for our civilian populations." The war was over, but the implications of how it had ended would affect galactic politics for generations to come. Commander Zeth filed his final report on the human military capabilities with a classification level that had never been used before. The report was sealed and restricted to only the highest levels of government in each allied species. "Recommendation," the report concluded, "establish permanent alliance with Earth, but under no circumstances should they ever be considered enemies. These beings do not fight wars in any conventional sense. They conduct systematic extinctions, with the efficiency of a natural disaster and the intelligence of an advanced civilization." The report included a detailed analysis of human tactics and psychology that painted a terrifying picture of Earth's capabilities. "They are not warriors," Zeth wrote. "They are apex predators who have learned to use technology and organization to enhance their natural hunting abilities. They view other intelligent species as either allies or prey, with no middle ground between those categories." Captain Jake Morrison's final log entry was characteristically understated. "Mission accomplished. The galaxy needed pest control more than it needed heroes. Good thing Earth had plenty of exterminators available. The human fleet prepared to return to Earth, leaving behind a galaxy that would never feel quite safe again." The Vorth Empire was finished, but every other species now understood what humanity was truly capable of when threatened. In the deepest archives of the Galactic Council, new files were created with the highest possible security classifications. These files contained detailed analyses of human warfare capabilities and strict recommendations for future interactions with Earth. The primary recommendation was simple: never, under any circumstances, should humanity be given a reason to view the galaxy as a threat that needed to be eliminated. The humans had come to the galaxy as requested heroes, but they were leaving as something much more dangerous. They were apex predators who now knew that the galaxy existed, and they had proven that they could hunt successfully among the stars. The war was over, but the hunt would never truly end.